Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Erin Kopek, and I'm the Director of Marketing for Higher Level. Today, you have joined our monthly High Notes panel discussion. We are doing something a little bit different this month, and we have some guests joining us that we're super excited about. Just a couple of reminders before we get started. You are set up in listen-only mode. We are going to save the questions for the end, but you're able to do that on your question toolbar and go to webinar. So type up your questions, let us know what feedback you have, and we'll do our best to get those answered for you. The call will last about 1 hour, and we're super excited to join you this morning. All right, today, again, thank you for joining us, and happy Tuesday. Today you will hear from some of our community partners. We have Kathy Lambert with Connections to Success of St. Louis and Kansas City, which provides a network of services and support to individuals really to become economically self-sufficient and to better provide for themselves. We also have Samantha Stengel here with the Clark Fox Foundation, and alongside, of course, is also Higher Level's President and CEO Teresa Chubik and Jason Watson with Mission St. Louis. So thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Teresa, I turn it over to you to kind of give us a state of the workforce and kind of just an update from the higher level standpoint.
Absolutely. Thank you, Erin, for getting us all together and all that kind of good things. Well, a couple things that we have seen at higher level is, I know on a national level, the unemployment rate is running around 3 to 4%, depending on what market you're in. But truly in the recruitment world, the unemployment rate is basically zero. We are finding it every single day, increasingly harder and harder to find good quality applicants that our clients are looking for. And I think the key word there is quality, want to go to work every day and really have the get up and go to want to be there. It's taking 40 to 60 days average to fill an open position. We are also seeing that with our own business. We have several positions open right now that take us, you get a 2-week notice just to find decent people. It takes you 2 weeks just to even start interviewing. The number of, I'm sorry, just a minute. The number of openings really exceeds all the hires because there's a low labor force participation. I mean, everybody knows that people are working, that there's really not that many people looking for work. And that's expected to continue for the next decade. The gig economy and the startup community, they like entrepreneurship. They really don't have a desire to run out and work for others. So those of us that depend on that type of workforce really is looking for that type of team that wants to come in and learn, and we have the ability to teach them more. There's a huge skills gap, and we all see that too. We see that within, a lot of the trades. We even see our union employers really looking now to bring people into their programs and help them become plumbers and operators and electricians. But we also have that within our warehousing and our logistics communities. They're really looking for people to come in as an entry-level person and move up. We're seeing very high turnover for the people that are in the market. Unfortunately, a lot of them are not well trained. They have challenges with various things. They're not used to going to work every single day. And that again goes back to the word of quality. And I think the thing for us is, have you ever considered hiring people with criminal records or justice involved? Removing that blanket no felony policy. According to SHRM, 48% of hiring managers are willing to hire those with criminal records, but only 3% are actively recruiting their team with looking at people that are justice involved. Higher level, just some background on us. We started as a small business in Southern Illinois. We've grown to over 40 million in sales, and we service clients nationwide. As a single mother with 2 kids in 1995, I started this business on a credit card and a prayer. And I understand what hard work is. And I believe in the value of that hard work. But what if I had made a mistake and had a felony? I'm a CPA. I would have lost my license. I would have lost the ability to really, my degree would have been gone. I couldn't have used it. So that is why it is my mission for Higher Level to be able to bring people with diverse backgrounds together by strengthening our communities, growing our businesses, and hopefully changing people's lives. We see at Higher Level how a background can affect employability on a daily basis. You know, I have employers back to their logistics, boat builders, truck drivers, all these things, and then they have a blanket no felony policy, which really limits the ability for us to put people into those positions. And I mean, you know, things where it happened 5-6 years ago, where it is someone is, you know, maybe was a CNA and wrote bad checks, has a misdemeanor, has a felony, and they cannot go back to practicing that or using that license. And those are the things where we really feel like it needs to be, we need to tap this underutilized workforce. And the best part about it is they're excited to go back to work. We see things on, you know, I see things on Facebook all the time where people are looking for jobs and they'll say, but I have a record. And it'll be where they cannot find work because they cannot use their license or their skills because it has been wiped off because of their the challenge they had. And it could have been many, many years ago. And we all know we've all made mistakes in our lives, but how do we help people overcome them? Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, Teresa. So now we're going to pass it on to Samantha Stengel with the Clark Fox Foundation and kind of hear about just the scope of the problem for her angle.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. Thank you for having me here this morning.
Thank you.
So I think when we start talking about mass incarceration, it's always good to start with some really fundamental numbers and understanding the scope of the issue. So we currently have 2.3 million people in our jails and prisons. We have an additional 4.6 million people on probation and parole. So we combine those two portions, we're talking about 7 million people in our system. That 7 million represents a 500% increase since 1970. That 7 million also does not include the nearly 12 million people that cycle in and out of our jails each and every year. So if these numbers sound a little bit high to you, it's because they are. The United States incarcerates more of its own citizens than any country in the entire world. We are the leader of hyper-incarceration. And it's really expensive from a taxpayer perspective to maintain this level of incarceration. So very conservatively, it's estimated that we spend about $180 billion each year on our jails, prisons, courts, and policing. That doesn't factor in the social costs or kind of the economic costs. That's actual dollars and cents that are spent each and every single year. And this system has real implications for children, families, and communities, which we'll talk about here shortly. So we cannot talk about mass incarceration without acknowledging the disproportionate impact that it has in our community. So the average, the risk of incarceration for white males in our community is 1 in 17. For Latino men, it's 1 in 6. And for African American males, it is 1 in 3. Clearly, something is not functioning here in our criminal justice system. I also want to just highlight that incarceration doesn't happen in a silo. It happens to children and families, right? So on any given day in this country, 2.7 million children have a parent currently incarcerated. And the research is really unequivocal on how harmful parental incarceration can be to child well-being. So I want to take that framework and talk about the implications for what we're here today to talk about, which is workforce development and our economy. So Teresa highlighted some of this already, but I want to just give you a few more really startling statistics. The economic impact of this system, the underemployment and unemployment of people with criminal records costs us between $78 and $87 billion each and every single year. We also know, and Teresa highlighted this very well, that we have a labor shortage, and it's anticipated to get worse and prolong for many different sectors. But I want to talk a little bit about one of the solutions, which is really what we're here today to talk about, and because I'm a solutions-focused person as a social worker. So 85% of correctional facilities offer formal educational opportunities, and 52% of them offer vocational skills training. So people who get involved in the criminal justice system often have opportunities to advance a level of education or get critically needed job skills. But those skills it's a moot point if when they come out, they're not able to get a job, right? So it's really important that we connect them with opportunities. As it sits right now, however, unemployment rates for people with a criminal conviction are 7 times higher than the general population. And we know, I mentioned this earlier, what we're really doing is impacting families. When we take wage earners out of the home, on average, families impacted by incarceration have 64% decrease in their assets. So again, thinking about children and family well-being, it's just really disruptive. We also know that 95% of people that go into our Department of Corrections nationwide come home. So it's important to understand that most people who go into the justice system are coming back to the community. It's really a question of how we want them to come back and how we want them to re-enter as productive members of society. What we know with extensive research, and it's probably very intuitive to those of you with us today, is that employment is one of the most significant components of successful re-entry. Because if you think about what a job does for someone, it provides a pro-social environment, helps kind of anchor people in the community, allows them to support their children, their families. All of these things are powerfully protective in reducing the risk of recidivism. I'd also just like to highlight that when we look at the research, which is what we do full time, is look at the extensive research on this issue, people who have a criminal conviction are no more likely to be let go early for performance issues and are actually more likely to have a lower turnover rate and have higher rates of promotion. So for companies who are interested in exploring this with appropriate holistic screening, where you get rid of things like blanket bans on any type of conviction and are willing to learn more about what happened in someone's story and what happened in their trajectory, there's a real opportunity for a very talented and very motivated workforce. So just kind of closing out, any way that you look at it in this very brief time, I hope I've conveyed that our criminal justice system has some real challenges. Very disruptive to children, families, and communities. And actually the way it sits right now with how recidivism is happening, it's actually endangering public safety. So we really have to look at how we can kind of stem the tide of people going into the justice system. But more importantly, I think for us today, the opportunity is how do we help people come home? And one of the major solutions is gainful employment. So thank you for joining us today.
Not to jump in, but I think the statistic I found so just terrible was I believe it was 75% of people still unemployed at the end of year one after their prison. I mean, how in the world would we ever think that people are going to go back? I mean, that is to me the thing that just as a community leader and as someone who, well, I want to think I have a heart, just how do we think that people can support, if you can't support your family, what else are you going to do? And that's a statistic to me that we as employers have, and community people have to say, what do we do to fix that? What do we do to
change?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Needs to change.
All right.
Which actually brings up what talking about change and systems change. And Teresa, you're exactly right too, and Samantha, that there needs to be a change across our country. And there is now a big push on the federal and state levels with the different agencies, departments. For example, the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Labor, Department of Workforce Development, and social service, like all of them all coming together and really taking a look at how can we reduce some of those barriers and obstacles? How can we leverage our resources? So even taking it to a state level, for example, in Missouri, what's happening is the Department of Correction, Department of Workforce Development, and Social Services are all coming together and saying, okay, how can we work together to leverage our resources, but also some of those obstacles and barriers with someone that is justice involved and getting ready to re-enter back into the community. Our system has a lot of obstacles set up that do make them to fail, and that's why that high recidivism rate. So it's exciting, I guess, to me too, to see that there is some change that is beginning to happen. And even taking it from that high level of systems level and taking it to the ground level where before the end of the year, this past year, we were able to participate with the Department of Corrections, with Central Workforce Development, with social services, child support, and put together a reentry initiative as a pilot of all of us coming together to say, all right, how can we do this to prevent that 73-75% going back after that first year? So with doing that, we started with a class, a 10-day class, and Central Workforce Development said, you know what, we'll pay for that, but we'll also look to see what are some of those jobs that are in demand, and what are some of those skills? And Samantha, you mentioned, in our prisons, there's training, there's apprenticeship, certificate programs. So how can we take that and tie that to employers that, Teresa, that you all work with, and be able to help them to get ready for that employment once they walk out the door? We also had child support that came in. Child support is a huge obstacle for non-custodial dads. And so child support came in, they met with all the non-custodial dads, helped them to have a plan. And so upon release, they would know what that plan is. So with that, for example, one of the guys, he had a stay on his driver's license. He had a car, so he knew that upon release that he would be able to get a job, but he wouldn't be able to drive his car. What child support did, because he had a plan, is that they were able to remove that stay on his driver's license. The young man was released. He was able to get a job within a couple of days, and a job that was $14, just a little over $14 an hour, which is incredible. But that's an example of how coming together to help to say, how can we help to remove some of these obstacles? The other part of that is as well is, for example, workforce development. Coming in and signing people up, for example, filling out their applications with them for WIOA, which is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, that also is offered at all of the job centers. However, individuals upon release, there's so much that they have to navigate, and then to go to a job center, many times that's days, weeks, sometimes they don't even get there. But what this is able to do, and with the workforce being able to come in and help them fill out that job application, upon release, immediately they had access to training, immediately for them to be able to get employed. Then they also, because of those certain funds for them, there was funding to pay for their work supports. For example, if they needed work boots or what have you. So again, that's helping to remove some of those obstacles and barriers. We also had employers that they came into the training and into the class. So the class was a 10-day class, and we did it inside and 60 hours. But employers came in, they talked about what they were looking for. And then we had the guys, we suited them up, and we had mock interviews. So employers came back in, and it was amazing to see what happened. It was kind of like the magic happened, where employers could look at them and they would tell us, you know what, it's just like me. They're just like me. And so many of them wanted to go ahead and hire them. So being able to offer those types of opportunities, I think, are things that are really helping to see some change happen for those that are involved within the justice system, and really taking a look at, we have a workforce that is coming out, that is ready, determined, and they have the skills necessary for the employers. You can tell I have a lot of passion.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think we, from all angles, it really sounds like there's a lot of work to do, but I think with the commitment and just working together, I think is what it takes. So Jason, thank you for joining us today. We're going to kind of let you take the floor here and talk a little bit to us.
Absolutely. Again, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Not only do I have the pleasure of being able to work with justice involved individuals, but I am previously a justice involved individual myself. So I know what it takes to be able to navigate the landscape of trying to land employment, trying to provide for your family. I've been married for 15 years. I have 3 children, and just all of the difficulties, or what we would call collateral consequences, that come along with previously being incarcerated. So I have the opportunity to work with the organization called Mission St. Louis. I am currently the director of Beyond Jobs. We work with about 150 men a year. We take a similar approach where we walk with those men for about 14 months. The first 8 weeks is really intensive, teaching those men job training, a lot of the soft skill pieces, but then making a call to the business community to say, if we want to see change in our city, we need to offer opportunities to those that are hungry to work and to provide for their families. Those men do a 2-day-a-week internship with those particular companies, and then that turns into employment for those men when they graduate. I say all that to say this, that the justice system does not always get it wrong. In my case, I was offered an opportunity where I was able to get some treatment because I had a drug addiction that I wrestled with, and a lot of my criminality was connected to that particular drug addiction. It wasn't that I wasn't smart. I was very smart in school. And in fact, I often say a lot of the things that I learned while I was in the streets are transferable skills that can actually be used in corporate America. So getting men and women to understand that, while also being able to advocate and educate employers on what it looks like to work with those individuals, is really important. Last thing I'll say is I often talk about what I call right, wrong, and reality. And I say that to say that often when you're put into a situation, your reality changes based off your circumstances, right? So your right and your wrong will shift because your reality says that I need to do something different in order to be able to take care of myself or provide for those that are around me. So I'm not saying that the behavior is correct. I'm saying that the mentality behind it is a mentality that we all have as it relates to protecting or providing for our families. So for us, we've seen a lot of growth in the men that we work with, but we've also seen a lot of interaction with the employers that we work with in connection with those men that go through our program. So for us, that's vitally important. But for me specifically, my passion comes from understanding that struggle, growing up in an environment where it seems like that's the only option that you have, even though in reality it's not. So you find yourself making decisions in order to provide, and in doing so, you take risks that wrap you up inside of the system. Then when you're released back into the community, when I was released from jail, I was returned right back to the same environment that I came from, with the same opportunities. Everybody that was selling drugs when I got incarcerated was selling drugs when I was released. So you find yourself in a situation where if you don't have the proper support system around you or access to the right resources, you'll find yourself easily returning to that same behavior. So for me and for us as an organization, it's really about empowerment. So it's really about teaching people that you have the skills, you have the abilities, you just need the opportunities, and you need someone to walk with you through that particular process. And we've seen a lot of men be successful as a result of that.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for sharing your story. And I know, Teresa, you had a story that you would like to share with us today, too.
Well, one of the things that, is kind of I don't want to say that higher levels ever had a no felony policy, but when you're in a, we're in a very clerical, we do payroll services, we do employment services. For our internal hiring, we never really even thought about what is a no felony policy. I mean, we've never even thought about it. For many years, we didn't even run background checks. So we started doing that consistently 2-3 years ago. And we ran across a background for someone that we were wanting to hire. And we started looking at it, and we started looking at the dates and looking where it was. And the crazy part is, we have this person who had, she actually has 4 kids, had a horrible medical emergency, had to declare bankruptcy, after like a year, because they're coming after her and they're trying to take everything you have. And one of those things was her car, which clearly, back to your driver's license, Kathy, back to if you're not paying your support, so they take your driver's license. Well, that makes it real hard to pay child support. And so anyway, so the same thing. So they're trying to take her car. So she takes the car and she hides it from the, I guess, the repossession people, what's the guys that come around and take those. And so she hides it from them so she can continue to get to work every day. Fast forward 2-3 years, all of a sudden, she's now working for us, and they show up at her door basically with a warrant for her arrest from whatever who at GMAC or whoever owned the car at the time. And she didn't want us to know. So she pled guilty to that felony. And all of a sudden now we have someone with a felony. And then, which doesn't change her hard work. I mean, she's on our management team. She does a great job for us. I mean, but it's back to circumstances. And this person never served a day. So you're talking a lot, Kathy, and Jason, about people being released. There's tons of people out there with felonies who have never served a day in prison,
Right.
ever. So I think the other thing is we have another person who works with us, same sort of thing, traffic tickets, did something really again, has a felony. This, in the end, it doesn't affect who they are. They made mistakes, 3-5 years ago. So we're just going to say, no, you're never going to work again. I think those are the things that we have to look at. As much as employers, they really get terrified, I think, when you talk about being released from prison, but you have better checks and balances on that team member or that person joining your team than almost anyone, because there's so much great support from people like Mission St. Louis or Connections to Success, and even our Second Chance program. What are we offering? We're offering that accountability to the employer. So I think for all of us, we really just need to take a hard look at what does it look like when you hire someone that's been justice involved. We see people, even misdemeanors are enough.
Very true.
Samantha, I don't know that you've spoken to that number, but to say no misdemeanors, I mean, that's a whole different number that gets rolled out there. I mean, we think, do you know what that number is? Does anybody know that number?
I don't. You?
No.
But that's crazy.
I don't know the number.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I can
we
add
do
this
see
to
that.
what you said, Teresa. If I could add this for the sake of context, I've shared this story before. I have a good friend. He did 8.5 years in a federal penitentiary. Really smart guy. I mean, if you met him, you'd never know he's been incarcerated in his life. He was released about 2 years ago. Ended up got out, got his CDL, did a great job, ended up getting a job. He's making $33 an hour, but he's on federal parole. So he's driving, he has a truck, everything's right. He's pulled over by the police. Now, some people aren't going to understand this, but I want to share this because it's important. His father, who was a bus driver, had borrowed his truck and left his legal handgun inside of his truck. Now, he's on federal parole and did not know that his father had left his handgun in his truck. His father texts him while he's driving and says, "Hey, I left my handgun in the truck. I just want to let you know." Well, he gets pulled over by the police no less than 5 minutes later. He's on federal parole, just did 8.5 years in the penitentiary. He's pulled over by the police for absolutely no reason. They ask him for license, registration. He provides them with all of that. They then say, "Well, sir, we're going to need you to step out of the vehicle." So now he knows that there is a handgun inside of his car that's not even his, even though it's a legal handgun. It belongs to his father. If he's caught with that handgun, he's immediately going to jail. So what does he do? Does he say, "Okay, sir, I'll step out of the vehicle"? Or does he say, "Man, I'm gonna have to take my chance and take off"? Well, what he did was he took off because he knew in his mind that I'm not going to be able to show the police this string of text messages that this is my father's handgun. So he takes off. He gets away. He's like, "I don't want to jeopardize a $33 an hour job. I can't explain to the police the situation. I'm on federal parole. So if I'm caught with a handgun, it doesn't matter who it belongs to. I'm immediately going back to jail." I'm stating all of that to say that there are certain things that take place, even for those that are attempting to do something better. I mean, at this point, he has his own home, he owns his own truck, he has a great job, and he's in a situation that was completely out of his control. And we see this happen often for those that are trying to make that transition. So I share that story to say sometimes we don't understand what happened behind the scenes. And also we don't understand the trajectory that this person has been on that may have landed them back in a different situation. Again, it may have been out of his control. Not always the circumstance, but in this circumstance, it happened exactly that way. And a person was forced to be put into a situation. Needless to say, he's okay now. Everything's been taken care of. He ended up not being incarcerated for that because as stated, he got away. So he still has his job. But sometimes people end up in situations that are out of their control, and they feel like they're forced to make a decision that they really don't want to make.
All right, thank you for that, Jason. So I think next we're going to hop to some questions that we have prepared for the ladies here, Teresa, Kathy, and Samantha. So first, Teresa, you mentioned the higher level second chance program. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that program helps reduce the risk for employers that we work with?
Well, I think it's more, and I don't even want to say the risk of the hire, because that's not really what it is. It's no different than if you were hiring someone else. But I think what we're doing is we just have a person on our team who helps oversee that hire for our client. And we do apply for the federal bonding. We check in. So first of all, we make sure that the barriers to employment have been removed. And we work with people like Connections to Success. Also, you work with Mission St. Louis, those types of community nonprofits that are getting these guys started. So we first work with them and make sure that everything's ready to go. Do they have a ride? Do they have boots? Do they have everything they need to get to work every single day on a timely basis? We check in with them regularly, and we also work very closely with every employer to set up a program that says, this is what success looks like. Because every employer that's different. You know, what in the world does that mean? You know, what does success look like for each employer? And that there may be some questions with that, and I'll happily address them, but most of those are taken care of when we sit down with that employer and work through it. I think that the real difference is we're there. We're going to be that person that's helped work with your supervisors. We're going to work with, hopefully, with that team member that you've hired and help them get through any challenges they might be having. If they, you know, my mom has a doctor's appointment, kind of Jason with you today, right? Your wife, you only have one car. How does that happen? You get dropped off. All those things are things that not everyone knows how to deal with on a daily basis. And that way, the counselors at Connections to Success, the team member that works for higher level, addresses that before the workday starts, not when they're late for work. So that's just some of the things, but I think it's really us being that middleman, the try before you buy to a certain extent, and helping on that messaging and really just putting it in front of the employers and being able to have them have a middle layer of saying, let's again, try before you buy, which is what we're selling, even with just straight temps or temp to hire positions, but really being able to let this person be successful and showing the employer what success looks like in their world. So.
Right, I agree with that. And I think too, when we're thinking about, you know, the success of this, it's really helping employers obviously open up your applicant pool to this untapped market, obviously hoping to fill your positions quicker, which we know is a challenge these days. And then also, I think too, a big thing is we all know recruiting and onboarding costs continue just to skyrocket. Right. So really just helping on that front too, I think is another benefit of opening up your no felony policy. All right, Samantha, you're next. So really, Samantha, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the misconceptions of the justice involved community members, some of the things we haven't maybe discussed today?
Yeah, absolutely. So two things, I could do this for another full hour. So I wrote a couple things down to try and stay concise. Two things I think that are critical to understanding. The first of which, and I call this law and order effect. People operate with the assumption that everyone got their day in court, and that if you have a conviction on your record, it came from a jury of your peers, you had an attorney while you were going through the process, and that you were convicted as a result of all the evidence. 97% of convictions in this country come from plea deals. Okay, so what that means is that 97% of people who go through our justice system never had a trial. Oftentimes what happens, because sentencing has gotten so long, a prosecutor has a lot of leverage and can say, I will give you 40 years in prison if we go to trial. That's what I will ask the judge for. Or you can take 2 years of probation and go home right now. And for people, particularly who have been detained in pretrial detention, who couldn't make a $500 bond, in conditions that are unspeakable, they take the deal. If someone said to me, you can have 40 years and face 40 years in prison, or you can go home right now and just be on supervision for a few years, most logical people are going to take the plea deal. And so I just think it's important to know that how we conceptualize our justice system is not what you see on TV. And 97% of convictions in this country come from the plea deal. I think that's important. The second thing that I want to say has to do with how people go back into, when we talk about recidivism. So nationally, up to 80% of people are rearrested within 5 years. So a couple things, when we talk about recidivism, we think about recidivism, there's a couple distinctions I want to make. Most of the time, particularly here in the state of Missouri, but this is true nationwide as well, when people go back into jail or prison, it's often for technical violations or probation or parole violations, like crossing a state line or missing a meeting with your probation or parole officer, not having a clean drug test, things like that. So those revocations, those are not new crimes. They're very technical violations, are part of what's driving recidivism. And so when we think about this kind of concept of criminality or criminal behavior, it's really important to know that recidivism is a complicated statistic to look at. One of the other things really driving recidivism has to do with fines and fees. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of those because I don't know that unless you've been in the justice system or your family's been impacted, that it's super clear. First of all, a lot of people impacted by this system come from low-income backgrounds, under-resourced families. So they often can't afford an attorney. And here in Missouri, we have the 49th lowest funding for our public defenders. So public defenders have way too many cases and not enough time with their clients. So their constitutional right to representation is already problematic and challenging. But people who go through the justice system are expected to pay court fines and fees for that process. Oftentimes they have to pay for room and board for having been in prison or in jail. The cost of items within our facilities have really skyrocketed. So it can cost $6 or $7 a minute to call your family. There's no regulation on how much a phone call can cost. And so people who are already pretty financially destitute are really isolated from their families because of barriers like that. And then when we have people coming back into the community, you have the distinct honor of paying for probation and parole. So people coming home have to pay a monthly fee for supervision. So I just think it's important to know when we talk about recidivism, it's not a pathology of criminology. What we've really done is criminalize poverty. So for people who can't afford to pay, it's just a loop. It's a feedback loop back into the system. And so that's why jobs are such an important, critical disruption point for stopping the cycle, for making families and communities whole again.
And I want to go just back into the what do we see at higher level on a regular basis. Exactly what Samantha's talking about. We have people who come in, again, have never served a day, who literally 18 years old, was in a car that was stolen. They said, you're just going to plead guilty to a felony, not even a year a lot of times on that. Or again, tickets, all these things, it can be scary to, oh gosh, I want to hire someone who's just now getting out of prison. I mean, I think that should always be considered. But I think the main thing for all of us is realizing, hear the story first. Find out who this person is. Let us help you determine what does that look like. Maybe again, you allot 5 positions, and that's what Connections to Success and other and the Second Chance program and the communities that we work with, other markets in Indianapolis and Evansville and those. We're working with those community partners to make sure this person is successful. Don't just think it's someone who had an armed robbery or, I think unfortunately back to what Samantha says, our mind immediately goes to a murder.
Right.
We back it way up and say, blanket no felony policies affect so many more people than that is probably what 2 to 5% of who we're talking about. The rest is people who have done just stupid things, took a plea deal, like she said, 97% take plea deals. That's what we're here for. That's the stuff that we're trying to really make a difference on and help you realize why it's so important to not just have a blanket no felony policy, because there's these great community partners that can help us really help people be successful.
And Teresa, in doing so, you're missing out on a pool of talent that you don't realize are passionate about work. They really desire an opportunity. I mentioned that we partnered with Slalom, which was a Fortune 500 company, had never hired anybody that was, you know, justice involved, but the manager just happened to be a social worker. So he kind of thought through a different lens. So he reached out to us, wanted to work with one of our guys, give him an internship opportunity. Our guy had never graduated college, didn't finish high school, had a felony on his record. He was the only guy in the internship that was African American and the only guy in the internship that didn't have some type of degree. He did better than everybody in the internship. So much so that Slalom offered him the job less than 30 days into the internship. And he was hired making $60,000 a year. To this day, he's one of their top performers. And he's been there less than a year. So I say that to say that Slalom then came back to us and said, we believe that there's a pool of talent that we have yet to tap into because of our fear of those that are justice involved. So they've said, well, we want to continue this relationship and this partnership because we realize in offering this opportunity has actually allowed us to see something that we were not able to see prior to. And that is, again, that talent and that pool of passion and opportunity for those who want to work, who want a great opportunity, and who will take advantage of it as well.
All right, thank you, Jason. So Samantha, one more question for you. What reforms are happening in Missouri and nationally that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so many. So nationally, I'd say the trends that we're seeing, 35 states have now passed a Justice Reinvestment Act. So it's important to know that real reform is happening at the legislative level and from a lot of governors around the country. Here in Missouri, we passed our Reinvestment Act in 2017, and we're seeing all sorts of reforms happening, momentum. I can't even keep my slide deck updated because every day the courts are becoming more involved. There's a real awakening in the United States that we have made a big mistake in the last 4 decades in our response to very social and economic issues. The criminal justice response to families who are struggling has not worked, and it's made things a lot worse. And so we are seeing reforms all over the country. One other thing I would highlight is that bail reform has picked up momentum. A few states are no longer using cash bail, meaning that if you can't afford $100, your bond may be set as low as $100, but for families who really don't have resources, really don't have high-paying jobs, $100 can be very prohibitive. And so that person currently in most states will have to sit in jail 30, 60, 90, 100 days until they can get before a judge. In the meantime, even spending 3 nights in jail, you can lose your job. It can disrupt relationships with families. And so we are seeing a lot of momentum around using risk and needs assessments to determine who actually, for the safety of the community, needs to be detained and who can go home to their families and back to work. And then finally, the big piece here, I think that the pivotal turning point in the criminal justice system, the opportunity to prevent everything that happens down the stream as you walk through the system, is the prosecutor's office. We have seen huge success here in the state of Missouri, all over the country, kind of reform-oriented prosecutors who are recognizing that the treatment for substance abuse shouldn't be 15 years in prison, that in fact exacerbates issues for people. And so we are very encouraged by the number of prosecutors who have stepped up to the plate and are approaching things from more of a public health lens, for more of a social justice perspective. And ultimately, we have seen 20 states in the last 10 years who have decreased their prison rates and decreased crime. It is possible to get people out of prison or out of jail, or to divert people before they have that plea deal and that felony conviction, even if they don't go to jail, and make our community safer. So it's very possible, and it's happening in a lot of places. So we're really excited about that.
You know, one of the things that you just mentioned in regard to substance abuse, and Teresa, I don't know if you see, I'm sure you see this as well, is that one of the things that I've seen happen specifically now within Missouri with probation and parole is that they're willing to work with the individuals that so many times they have to go see their probation officer during a workday, right? Or they have to go do a drop during the workday. So what they're doing is now they're saying, and I just actually talked with a director with probation and parole that said, we're working, we want our officers to work with the individual. So they don't have to time off. So that was an employer as well. Those are some of the things that is really important that's happening also.
Mhm.
Thank you, ladies. That feedback was kind of weird. All right, get your questions in. We have a couple more questions for Kathy. Renee. Did someone unmute? Yeah, some strange feedback.
I think you fixed it.
Maybe we're good. I didn't
Yeah, I
press
think we're
anything.
good.
No, you definitely fixed it. It's fine.
All right, Kathy. So tell us a little bit about, I know you help obviously people jump into the workforce, but give us a deeper dive of how you really help these candidates and what skills that they obtain working with Connections to Success.
Well, what everyone does when they begin with us at Connections to Success, we start with our personal professional development class, which is strength-based and also asset forming. So we help them to develop upon what are those strengths and assets that you already have, and then how can we build upon that. And then during the class, they learn about the cognitive behaviors and that restructuring. I was to say it's like kind of restructuring their thought process, helping them to think differently, helping them to see what can be possible, helping them to take responsibility, helping them to see that they can be successful, and then really to find out what are those passions, what are those skills that they've had, and then helping along with those pre-employment or soft skills, helping them to know that how to show up on time, what's the importance of that, being a team player, knowing about your attitude and how the attitude makes a difference, and then helping them to have a plan, not just one plan, but a backup plan for a backup plan for a backup plan. And Teresa, you mentioned, we talk about transportation and housing. So through the class, they also put together a life plan that looks at 9 different areas of their life. We know that employment is key and is crucial, and Samantha, as you stated, and know that employment is absolutely key. But if they don't know where they're going to stay, their housing situation, they don't know about their transportation, they're not going to stay in that job. So helping them to think through that life plan really becomes their roadmap. And then after, when they begin with us, many times they walk in with their heads down, their shoulders down. But during the class and during to see what can be possible and how they can begin to change their thought process, the transformation really begins. Everyone gets suited up. They learn how to do a 30-second commercial, how to interview. We have employers that actually come in. You all come in. We have employers come in to help with mock interviews, which most oftentimes lead to actual interviews themselves and to hire. Once an individual is employed, our team also goes to work at the time. We don't stop. What we do is we work together behind the scenes with the employer. Our companies like New Hire, we work with you, but helping also with that employee to coach them, also being there to help with other services behind the scenes, making sure that they're able to get to that job, making sure that they have that plan in place, and helping them so they can stay and not leave that job, but to be able to continue to move forward. And one of the other things that I think also what we help to do, and also I think with workforce development, that is a great resource in our community, is ongoing certifications and training. So for example, out of our East St. Louis office, we had a young man that was working in a warehouse. And so Lewis and Clark College provided a 1-day forklift certification. So he went for the 1-day certification training. The next day he went in with his certificate to his employer. His employer put him right on a forklift, and he also increased his wage from $10 an hour to $15 an hour. So being able to work with employers, being able to say, how can we help you to advance people? How can we help connect you with training, or we can connect to those participants, the employees, to be able to get trainings or more education so they can advance in the jobs that they currently have.
Great. Yeah, we see more and more that really on-the-job training and the skills gap is more of an issue. So definitely appreciate your insight on that. So my next question was, how do you work with other companies? But I think you kind of answered.
Kind of answered that. Yeah, kind of sorry about that. Kind of answered that. But we do offer, I think that with working with organizations like Mission St. Louis, other organizations throughout the community that do this type of work, I think it's so important to have those close partnerships, because those types of organizations, and like we offer pre-screened candidates. You know, we individuals that go through our programs, we all do assessments, we all know and work with them. So those candidates, we know that when we present them, that they're ready to work. And we're there also behind the scenes and providing those services together to make sure that they are successful. So I would really encourage anyone that's even outside of our areas, that in your own local communities, to see who you can partner with as a nonprofit organization that does this type of work as well.
That's great. Really helpful information for employers. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, so now is Q&A time for the audience. You will have a chat or a question function that you can type in your questions at the bottom of your GoToWebinar panel. Feel free to shoot away. You can identify if you are asking a question to a specific person, or just ask a question, and we'd be happy to do our best to answer it. So we'll give you a couple minutes to do that, and we can continue chatting. I do not see any questions coming in right now, but let me take a look.
So there is something, and Teresa, you brought up in regard to different licensing that individuals may have, and upon a felony conviction, that sometimes they lose that license or are not able to do it. Missouri just passed the new Fresh Start Act last week. I think it was last week. That is for 5 different credentials and certifications that they cannot be denied then of a felony conviction, unless it's something that says they can't enter into that field. But I think that that's a huge legislative move that was made last week.
And I'm pretty sure Illinois just did that earlier last year too. So
that's great. So it's awesome to see, I think, that movement across the country, with the different states really taking a hard look at the legislation.
Well, one of the things that I was speaking to when we were at the WeBank conference, which WeBank is women-owned businesses, we get together, and one of the big things at those for the national clients or for the bigger clients, that they have usually a diversity and inclusion initiatives. And I think the thing that we're asking a lot of those people who are setting those policies is, does part of that policy include justice involved? As you said, Samantha, the impact on, Hispanic and African American populations is tenfold. I mean, it's so much bigger than it is for Caucasian populations, that, putting the justice involved within that diversity and inclusion policy is also a big thing that, that's something you can do. And part of that can be help offset by using even contractors for, in the beginning, which is, again, the higher level second chance program. Just how do you get that in there so then you can start hiring and getting people? I do, you kind of mentioned this, we have if you talk to people, we actually just suffered, not our company, but we know a company that suffered a cyber extortion. What are people doing to offset cyber extortion? They're actually hiring hackers, people, to come in and fix this problem for them, because that's right. I mean, you've got to have that. So it is fun how you're seeing some of those things, but what can you do to also help put this in there? Can you start at a lower, you might not bring in, a CFO, but you want to bring in, let's start in our warehouse, let's start in, a controlled environment, let's start in some of those things. And that way you can see how it works. You can work with the supervisors in those locations and talk about what it takes. Because no matter what, there is no difference, in my opinion, between the labor market we're seeing now and hiring people that are justice involved. If anything, the justice involved have more motivation to get to work, to keep the job, to be consistent. We work with a work release program, a federal work release program in the Marion, Illinois market. They literally drop people off at work and pick them up. Mm-hmm. It's one of these things where there's really, the good news is work every single day because they're there. So, and 90% when we see that, the clients that we're working with that are using that work or that demographic, they're doing attempt to hire. They hire them at the end of 90 days. So, it is really a matter of looking at your policies and just you can make small changes in the beginning. Test, try it, figure it out, work with, and it doesn't just have to be higher level. There's many other people that have these programs. Mission St. Louis is also very much works with employers to figure out a way to get people to work and keep them there. So,
and one of the things that's always important for us in work, okay, I got you.
Yeah, no, sorry, we've got a bunch of questions.
We have some
Okay.
questions coming in, and maybe we can kind of let you chime in at the end, Jason, there. Apologize. So, all right, so we do have a couple people asking how long it would take to implement this type of program in their workforce as far as hiring these types of individuals.
I would say, if you're going to use the higher level second chance program, approximately 2 to 3 weeks at the most. We want to meet with you. We would want to meet with the community partners, do a little recruiting. If it's anywhere in the database we already have, we probably 30 to 40% of our database probably is justice involved in the beginning. So it doesn't take long, to be real honest with you, and getting that ramped up and getting that going. So I think the most important thing is finding a good fit for you as an employer. What does that success look like for you? It is absolutely not the same for everyone.
Okay, great. And I think we do have another question too, and this is regarding company culture. How, in your opinions, do you feel like that they can help their team members adjust to the new culture of hiring second chance individuals?
Jason, I would say that sounds like something right up your alley.
Yeah, I could definitely speak to that. One of the things that I think is really, really important is for your current market to understand that these are just individuals. They're just people, right? And in some cases, they're just people who have been caught. There are other people that already probably work for your company that just have not been caught, right? They already had a lawyer. So I say, number one, it's important for us to see them as people, as individuals, and not just criminals with a background. I think that's number one. Number two, I think it's important to make sure that they're treated like everyone else, the same standards, the same expectations, quality of work. The standards should be the exact same for those that are justice involved, and the same way that it is for those that are not. And I think number three is the difference between cultural competence and cultural humility, right? So it's the idea that you may know that someone has been involved in something, but it's also important for you to have the humility perspective to understand that there are people that have been in our lives, that have been in our homes, in our households, that have had some of these same issues. So again, just going back to the humanity portion of who we're dealing with, right? So we're not talking about criminals. It's really important for me to say that. We are talking about individuals that have made a mistake. So I think part of that culture is letting your company and those that you work with know that you're dealing with people who have a passion, who want to work really hard, and they should be treated like everyone else, and they're being screened in background like in the same fashion that everyone else is as well. And I think that helps people to be comfortable. And I think also letting them know what are the type of people that your company is willing to hire. So there are some things that we won't work with. So for example, even for us, we don't work with sex offenders. So I think it's important making sure that that company policy is understood all the way across the board, so that they know that if someone is hired with a background, it's not anyone that you have to be concerned with in certain aspects.
All right, great. Thank you, Jason. So we do have a couple more comments. So Rob, he made a comment here, and this is a very relevant topic just regarding transportation. He is a manufacturer in the Midwest in Missouri, which is the most progressive state on this subject. He said he recently met with the state and determined the problems were transportation. Now he is going to the probation office to hire, and the state is going to secure funds for everyday transportation. So do you ladies have any comments on how you're helping support these candidates with transportation? Because I do know that is a pretty big issue. We see it every day.
Well, I think that's the other part of, so he went to the state, and I think that's where with workforce development, an example that we're working with Lincoln County in Missouri with economic development, probation and parole, and also with NECACA Community Action Agency and workforce development all coming together. but helping to address that need for employers. And so being able to know that there's resources that are out there, and I think the time is right for this to happen, and we need to seize this moment, I think, too, and to be able to act upon it. But those resources are there to make that happen.
Great.
And that's kind of higher level is really stepping in, because some of these places and the employers, that seems really a lot to do, all right, I got to help this person find it. That's really what the Second Chance program is. It's saying, let us do that for you. Let us figure these things out. Let us help find the community partners that we can work with, not only higher level, but with these employers. It's just really important that as a tax-paying company, we're all doing this. This is where these nonprofits are being funded through our tax dollars. Let's use them to help people, and let's use them in a smart way. I mean, in Southern Illinois, we have Rides Mass Transit. We have southernmost area, regional transit. So there's a lot of things out there that I don't think people realize that's what they're for. And us being able to set them up, get routes together, do all the legwork, and make that happen. So that way, it's not outside your job. I mean, you can just say, here's why we're using higher level, because this is what they're doing for us. Here's the work that's being provided. And we work with Jason and Kathy and, get the statistics from Samantha and say, back to your team, here's why this is so important, and getting the buy-in. Because to me, we're at a spot where this is a perfect meshing of a great need within our communities, of jobs that need to be filled and people that are looking. And us to mark off half that list is just silly.
Right. And I just, along those lines, Teresa, what you're saying too, is that, I just encourage, if there's employers that are out there and listening, that they take a chance and offer a second chance. And as everyone, and what we were all saying too, that so many times we think that it costs so much money, but as what was stated today in the webinar, that it can decrease your turnover rate, it can increase your bottom line. They're contributing to the economy. So it doesn't cost, it actually pays. So I just encourage people to think about giving that second chance.
All right, great. And I think we'll kind of wrap up here. So there were a couple questions that we'll get to offline just regarding who to reach out to for hiring. I did want to say before we wrapped up today, there is a handout attached in your GoToWebinar toolbar. You'll be able to download all of our contact information, more information on the program, and specific questions. Feel free to reach out to hello@hirelevel.com, and we'll be sure to get you. And we'll be sure to with everyone. Any closing remarks?
Well, I think I would just say just a very 5-second version. What our foundation does is we provide education for free, professional development all over the community. And so if you are specifically interested in learning more, you talk about that cultural shift. If this is something you're really thinking about doing and something that you want your workforce to know more about, if you yourself as a leader want to know more about this issue, we're happy to come anywhere to give more presentations or have further conversations about why this is such a smart, common sense, logical thing to do from a research perspective. And so I know our contact information is listed in your handouts. I just wanted to kind of make that last kind of call to action. I don't think you can learn enough about this issue. There's always something new, and there's a lot of exciting things happening. So we would love for you to be a part of the solution and to join the momentum happening nationwide.
All right. Thank you very much for spending your morning with us, and reach out to us. We're happy to help and answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.